Okay, says excellent connection here. Don't know how long I've just been sitting here watching the screen here, but we are going to get started. Welcome to our Fish the Moment on the water live stream. We're going to be showing you all my graphs, all my electronics, Livescope, everything like that as I try to find some offshore summer bass here on Grand Lake in Oklahoma. We're in a public body of water. I was fishing Grand Lake about 2 weeks ago, but in a completely different area of the lake. I haven't been to Honey Creek where we are today in like a year. So literally going at this completely blind and fresh, which is my favorite way to fish. Before we jump into the fishing though, I do want to thank the sponsor of these Fish the Moment on the water live streams, Bridgeford Foods. Bridgeford has some of the best beef jerky on the market, and they're one of the few non-endemic companies or non-bass fishing related companies that support bass fishing. There's a lot of sponsored pros by Bridgeford, and it's just a great product that has great values as a company and supports the sport that we all love. So definitely check out Bridgeford beef jerky at your local gas stations, Walmarts, dollar stores, things like that. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's jump straight into it. I'm going to switch over my stream and we're just going to hope that everything is rolling properly. We're going to switch over to this. Let's see here. Looks like we got, okay, let's see. Okay, we got that. We're good. Let me switch to this screen. There we go. Can we see me? Okay, we think we're good. I'm hoping everything is going well. We're going to try. There we go. Okay, we're good. Okay, let's get after it, boys and gals. So this is where we're at today, guys. I'm just gonna show you the map. We're in Honey Creek on Grand Lake. Basically what we got here is we are in a major creek in the midsection of Grand Lake. If I kind of spin this, I can't really spin the map. But anyways, this is Grand Lake. It's really big. There's a lot of water to cover. There's a lot of stuff on the map here too. I don't really know what all that is, boat ramps and stuff. But we're back in one of the major creeks here and in a small arm off of one of these major creeks. So it's kind of a little sneakier deal. It's kind of back in somewhat in here. There's just a boat ramp that I launched at. That's why I'm over here. Let me put this phone over here for just a second. There we go. Keep it nice and close for the internet. So what we're going to do is we're going to start graphing, guys. And I don't know where the fish are at all, but I'm just going to start graphing some of the structure over here. We have a nice rounded point. We have another little sneaky rounded point I saw as I was just looking at the map earlier. Maybe we can find a shell bed or something there. And we have a nice ledge here. And then we also have a lot of just main lake and secondary points that we can graph. Maybe look for some brush piles. We got all kinds of stuff we're going to check out. And I'm just going to walk you through the whole process. Again, don't have fish found, so we are just going to give it our best shot here and see if we can find something. That's kind of the goal. So I'm going to start switching over to a combo view for you guys, and we're just going to look at a couple of spots in the back half of this creek first. There's a bunch of bait and stuff back in here. I noticed right when I launched the boat, there's a ton of stuff happening on the screen. And I know my face is kind of covering up the mapping, but I do want you guys to see me a little bit. And yeah, we're just gonna graph through here. I don't really like to get too beat up or caught up on exactly what I'm graphing when I get out here. I just like to get out here and just start going. I actually find I catch a lot more fish when I don't know what's happening on the lake. When you come out here and you know exactly where the fish are and things like that, a lot of times it can give you tunnel vision. And unless you actually know if there are fish there or not, a lot of times it can lead you down the wrong path. For example, I don't have a lot of spots in this creek. So it's not like I know like, oh, there's a shell bed here, a rock pile or a brush pile here or there. And I always find that I do better on those days because I'm not focused on, oh, I'm gonna go graph this brush or I'm gonna go graph this or that. I'm gonna really just fish the moment, fish the conditions, and I actually find I do better when I'm not practicing or not having fish found ahead of time. That's just me though. And one thing I have noticed is there is a pile of stuff on the down imaging here. A lot of random just fish, brush, bait, all kinds of random crap, which at times can be good, but at times it can be a little bit overwhelming. And I've heard that the fishing here on Grand has been very tough recently. Like it's taking like not a lot of weight to win tournaments. There's not a lot of big bags being caught. I have been out here one time last week and I caught a big bag of fish. My best 5, if I had put them all in the boat, would have gone like 25 pounds, 24 pounds. So there's some good fish out here. And there's actually some good fish setting up like right here. If we look at my traditional sonar, right on that break and a little bit off out in front of this break, which is kind of interesting. I don't know what species those are, but I am going to pause that and mark that really fast, just with the fish symbol, just because they look pretty decent on my 2D sonar in terms of the size of the fish. I'm gonna kind of spin back around and check that. A lot of the stuff you see on the screen here, guys, there's a lot of small bait and small fish on the screen. And what I do with my traditional and down imaging view is I filter out a lot of the crap that's on the screen using my 2D sonar by setting my settings lower. And that way, when I really get a good fish, like that fish right there, it really pops off the screen, where like on the 2D here, or on the down imaging, it's kind of cluttered. So I like that right there. That was further back behind us here. There's a better quality fish. But I'm gonna kind of graph around this, continue to graph around this, because I see there's a couple fish right there in the center of that little ditch, but I also want to kind of see if there's anything else that's happening. There's a lot of just bait and stuff happening up on the side of this ledge. There's some fish right there. Those look pretty interesting, all stacked up on this little drop off. There's a ledge right here. It drops off hard on the right side of the boat. It comes up on the left side. We switch over to our split screen. You can see that there are some fish schooling out there, but they're not very big. There's a couple of smaller fish. The reason I can tell they're not very big is just by the size of those fish on the 2D sonar. The 2D sonar shows that there's not that many big fish up like in this area here. They look like it's kind of interesting in that area, but all of those little arches are pretty small. I can't pause it. I don't know what's going on. But we're gonna kind of just keep graphing. I liked what I saw back earlier. I'm gonna go back over to this charts page. There's a lot going on with the screen and trying to show you guys all this stuff, so apologies if I'm talking fast. But right there, there's that nice little ledge, or that nice little rounded point. And the last time I was out here, I was catching a lot of fish in the center of these little cuts leading out of these pockets by one of these nice ledges or rounded points, but out here in the actual middle. And that's kind of interesting that there's fish there as well again. So we might make another pass over that and just regraph it here in a minute. It's kind of the plan. Don't know if we're still going on the stream. I'm just going and doing the best I can. If this doesn't work out super well in terms of the recording on live stream, I'll repost the recording. I actually have another recording going here as well, so I'll repost this on YouTube if the internet and stuff is kind of tricky, but we're trying our best here. Now, we do have some interesting stuff over there on the side imaging. We have a nice lay down with a couple of fish stacked around it, but there's a lot of stuff going on the screen, so I'm not trying to get too concerned about everything I'm seeing on the screen, to be honest, because there's just so much activity. But one thing I do like coming up on the right side of the boat is there is like a shallower little ridge or ledge, and it looks like we might have something that could be like a shell bed or some type of hard spot, high spot just off to the right of the boat. I want to see if I can see anything up there on the side imaging. I do see a couple of fish here, which is actually a really good sign, potentially on the traditional sonar. No, that's just bait. It looked like it could be fish, but it looks like it's just bait. There's a lot of bait out in front of this though. Not a lot of big fish. I'm gonna kind of re-graph around that. I don't want to get too shallow on this. There's a lot of, I think, gar. I'm seeing gar surface. It's kind of tricky, guys, when you get out here and it's like this, where there's just like stuff happening all over the banks. There's shad kicking everywhere, and you just have like an overwhelming amount of stuff on the screen. It can be kind of overwhelming to get out here and graph with your electronics. And that's why a lot of times when I'm doing my graphing, I like to really use that 2D sonar to filter out a lot of stuff. But I keep the traditional down imaging on, or the down imaging here, to let me see everything initially, and then I'll filter it out by switching to the other screen. We're getting really high up on this rocky spot. I'm kind of getting a little bit too shallow on it, but there's a bunch of good looking stuff there. You can see there's a bunch of shad and fish just out to the right side of the down imaging screen. There's a really nice rocky hard spot there. I kind of went right over the top of it, which is probably not the best, but there are some fish down there. You can see right here in the shadow of that little ledge right there, there's a fish or two, 3 or 4 fish. That looks pretty good. I'm gonna mark that as well. I'll come back and probably re-fish that if I end up fishing this thing over here, just because it looks really good. The problem is that I drove right over the top of it, so it's probably not gonna be the best like right this minute. But there were a couple of fish too on the traditional sonar here. Right there, there's a fish, there's one there, there's one there. not seeing there's one there. I'm not seeing bigs. I'm not seeing, you know, 3 and 4 pounders, which is kind of what we're looking for. Not like that first little ditch area. And I can just tell by the size of the arches on this 2D how big the fish are. And I do have settings guides, guys, for all the fish finders I use. I don't have this Garmin one with a settings guide quite yet because I'm still almost getting done dialing it in. I think I have it pretty much dialed. But I do have settings guides for Humminbird and Lowrance units where I set my unit up to look like what you're seeing on the screen here, where you can filter out those smaller fish, filter out all the bait. Like for example here, if I switch back over to the traditional here, you can see there's a lot more stuff happening on the down imaging than there is on the 2D screen. And I do that on purpose, again, to filter out a lot of those smaller fish, smaller bait. The reason these bait bowls are popping really good is because those are actually gizzard shad. You have bigger gizzards in Grand Lake, like 6 to 8 inch gizzard shad. And so you're gonna get those fish, those gizzard shad to pop a lot better. Ooh, there's a couple good ones way up on this flat right now. Is that, or, no, it's bait. I thought that was a bass, it's just bait. I was thinking that this right here was a fish. You can kind of see that nice dot there. It looks like a big dot on down imaging, but if you look at it on 2D, it's just a little ball, which means that it is just bait fish, which is good to know. That's why we run both. I'm gonna keep going over this real quick. I want to go over that little ditch area because I think that we might be able to catch a fish there actually, right in the center of this little ditch or depression, because I did see a couple fish there. To be determined if it actually is going to be good. And I do want to check that rocky spot too, but it's kind of far back in this creek and I do want to keep moving if there's not fish here. But I don't want to fish that rocky spot because I literally just blew it out with my engine in like 2 foot of water. Which is probably not the best idea, but that's what we did. The mapping showed they came up fast. I didn't believe it. Let's switch over really quick to this view so I can see both. Yeah, there's some better quality fish down in the center of this. You can see them, they're actually sitting dead on the bottom, guys. There's a bunch of bait down there, but there are some fish that are setting up right here in the middle of this cut, dead on the bottom. There's also some that are chasing around the bait. You can see them right here. We got a fish right here, another fish right here. There's actually, you can see a couple of them over here on the 2D right there, or the down imaging right there, there. These are all fish that are dotted up all over the bottom. I want to drop the Livescope on there and just see if I can get one of these fish to bite just for a second. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I'll just kind of get away from the spot for a second. I'm not going to waste a bunch of time on this. I don't want to spend like 20 minutes fishing here, but I do see a couple of decent quality fish there, so I want to check that really fast. I'm just going to move a little bit further away from this spot and spin this around so I'm not like stopping right on top of it. So we should be good. I'm just going to circle around. I got my range ring on my boat set to 100 feet, so I can kind of stay at least 100 feet away from these fish. I did graph over them twice, which, you know, it's fine. Can't really do anything about that when you're trying to find them live. You just gotta do what you gotta do. Let me check the stream to make sure. Looks like we're doing okay. Okay, so I'm gonna switch over here. I think we should be good now. You should be able to see my Livescope. So let's cook. Okay. Change my settings here on this unit. Grab out my secret bait that I've been throwing recently that we're releasing next week for Core Tackle, the little secret swim bait hook. You guys have heard me talk about it. We're releasing it later this or next week, next like Tuesday, I think is the plan. And that's why I caught some good ones on the other day on Grand. So let's see if that works. We'll also pull up the mapping here. Okay, so it's kind of a, I don't know what's going on with my screen. Oh no, it's doing the, 1 second. I need to stop the transducer for a second. Transmit off. On. Okay. Maybe that did it. Okay. They get this rocking thing that happens with Livescope sometimes, which is really annoying. No fire out there. Not gonna worry about it right now. That Livescope is rocking. Probably need to reset this unit, but it'll stop in a second. The boat's not moving, it's just the Livescope is just rocking. It's very weird. Anyways, we don't need Livescope always to catch fish. You can just catch them just fishing too, you know? If it keeps rocking here for a minute more, I'm gonna have to reset the unit. Just power it off and power it back on. Okay, I'm gonna have to do that. Just give me a second, guys. Sorry, I'm gonna check, make sure this is working. I'm gonna power this off. Just turn it off, turn it back on. You know, these are the technical difficulties you don't see when you're out in the lake. You're like, oh, everything goes smooth. Johnny just comes out here, just freaking wrecks them every single time. Oh, that's a really nice screen for you guys right there. That's beautiful. I'm gonna switch to this camera while this is rebooting so you don't have to look at the, ooh, what was that? There's like a bunch of gar. I might be looking at gar on the screen. These fish that are around. Some of them looked like bass because they're just chasing those shad, but these could just be a bunch of gar. And there's so much bait and just stuff happening back in this creek that I might just be, I think some of these might just be smaller gar. They don't, that's why they're looking kind of big. The arches are pretty wide. That's why I was thinking they might be bass. Okay, we're back, boys. Okay, let's switch back over here. System update, no, we don't need that. Okay, we're good. Okay, awesome. Okay, so you can see on the Livescope here, there's some fish that are just chilling. There's a bunch of activity around. I'm gonna see if I can see any better quality fish that are actually like set up right. There's just a lot of stuff happening here, and this is not, there's a decent one right there. Fire over at it. Around some bait. See if I can get my bait in that area. Yeah, there's a lot of crap on the screen here that it's just not, it's not fish, it's just, or it's not bass, it's just there's a lot of trash fish, there's a lot of just stuff happening right now. And I'm trying to see if any of these are better quality bass. When I'm seeing on the Livescope, I'm not seeing anything that like really jumps off the screen this exact minute. Get a little bit closer. There's a fish down there at like 40 feet that looks potentially a little bit better. But I'm not sure. That could just be a big gar, or it could be a lot of little small fish stacked together. It's kind of hard to tell. It looks like it might just be a bunch of small fish stacked together. There's my bait. Nothing's reacting to my bait either, which is always a great sign that we're not dealing with bass. Because if they wanted it, they would be all over it. Over here. There's just so much random stuff on the screen right now that it's kind of hard to tell what you're working with. There's so much shad. When I get in a situation like this, like the problem you run into is that you could do the best you can to identify these fish with the electronics and do all the stuff you can, and it's just, it can get overwhelming. I think a lot of these are gar. Not 100% sure. But I'm not going to waste a bunch of time on fish that I can't really tell what they are. That's a great way to waste your day away. So I'm not going to mess with that. I do want to see, okay, there's a couple of fish coming up off the bottom right there. There's some fish about 50 feet out that just came off the bottom. I'm trying to find these fish here on the bottom. That's kind of like my deal right now, is trying to find these fish that are setting tighter to the bottom and kind of recovering from that post spawn. It seems like that's been working really well for me, but, oh, come on. They're looking at it. Okay, yeah, they're not interested in that. You can see how many are down there though. It's just a freaking pile of them. We're gonna make a couple more casts, and then we're probably gonna go check that rocky spot, even though I know I literally just graphed over it, which is not the perfect scenario here, but I do want to go check it because that looked pretty good. One thing I do know when the fish get in this situation is if you can get them around hard cover, like a rock pile, a brush pile, things like that, they are much, much easier to catch versus when there's just shad everywhere. Honestly, if I was in this part of the lake today, and I'm kind of stuck here because this is what I got. I have cell reception here, so I got a fish here. But usually, if I'm seeing all of this sort of activity on a spot, a lot of times I like to leave and find a different part. And we're going to leave out of this creek here in a second. But I do want to check that little rocky spot. Didn't see anything big over there. I do want to check it out. We'll put these rods away. Go back over to that rocky spot for just half a second. Switch back over here. And then we're gonna get out of here because I'm not really digging this. Make sure to put your life jacket on, even if you're just idling around. In a slow no wake area, so it's not like I'm gonna do any real damage. It's always good to have a life jacket on, especially if you're out here fishing by yourself. But yeah, so there's some fish down here. Oh man, okay, well, I need to get my settings redone. Give me a second. I restarted my unit, and every time I do that on this Garmin, I need to figure out how to not have this happen. It resets all my settings, and I have to go back and save my presets in here. Man, there's so much bait in here. Dang. I can see why people are struggling to catch them right now, because there's just a lot of stuff happening. In some parts of this lake, it wasn't this bad. In the other section of the lake I was fishing the other day, it was definitely not this bad. Sometimes certain sections of the lake just get really overrun with shad, and it just makes it really tough to catch them. And on a lake that's as big as Grand Lake, a lot of times, focusing on one creek or one section like I'm doing today isn't always the best strategy if you're trying to catch them a specific way. My plan today is to catch them fishing offshore, and that's what we're going to try to do with the electronics and everything. But that doesn't mean, even though I want to catch them offshore, it doesn't mean I'm going to catch them offshore today, because I just might be in the wrong section of the lake. I mean, I crushed them, hammered them, 25 fish in a day just last week. In our part of the lake, I have a YouTube video coming out next week with all of that footage, so you'll be able to see it. I caught them down the lake. But I wanted to try something different today. I don't like to just pull up the fish that I've found, because that's not really the real experience. The real experience is doing what I'm doing right now, which is not knowing where the fish are and just trying to figure it out. Some nice rock right there. What are those? Those don't look like bass. Those look like white bass, maybe? They're not stacked that high. What are those? I have no idea what those are. I'm gonna mark that real quick. I'm like 90% sure those are not bass, but we can confirm with one crankbait cast on those fish. I'm gonna mark that. It's a little rocky spot. It could be pretty good if those are actually fish. Those are bass. I'm marking that really fast. I'm gonna hit this rocky spot, literally like 5 casts I'm gonna make on this, make 5 casts on that rocky spot, and then we're gonna get out of this, back into this creek, head more towards the main lake. Maybe there's a little bit less shad back in there, and that'll help us out a little bit, because it's kind of crazy how much shad is back in here. There's a lot of random stuff going on. There's actually carp jumping, or like carp and gar surfacing all over this rocky spot that I'm about to fish, which is not necessarily a deal breaker for me, but it's not really the best sign in the world. So we're only gonna make a handful of casts. Usually this time of year, if they're here, you should be able to just know right away. So I'm gonna pick up a bait, like a crankbait, where I can just burn it over this really fast. See if I can get a bite or two, maybe fire a shaky head or something like that. What is happening to my screen? All the ranges are set to auto. Perfect. It's not what we want at all. Okay. Let me pull up the deal. Let me make sure I'm actually here. I'm just gonna crank this with a Spro, little John DD, just for a couple casts. Because if they're up there and they're grouped up on this rock, it's kind of still the morning. We have a full moon today, so these fish should be aggressive here this morning. Hopefully. There's a lot of stuff happening, at least. I see fish busting on shad up there. I'm gonna make a couple casts with this crankbait. I'm also gonna bomb a topwater over the top of this for a second. just to see if they want to top water this morning. There's a bunch of stuff down there. Okay, I'm actually just gonna go straight to the top water because there's a little bit of muck down there. It's a little sneaky bait for you guys. It's a evergreen, what is this called? The SB 150. It's like a big pencil popper. This thing can straight smash them this time of year. They're set up on these shallower drops. They're not used to seeing a big top water. A lot of guys come through here and they crank, they throw a worm, stuff like that. Fewer guys come in and throw a big top water over the top of this stuff. So we're gonna see if we can find some active fish this morning, as opposed to trying to spend a ton of time just dragging a worm, because I haven't seen a spot yet that has a bunch of fish on it. One just busted next to the boat. I'm gonna make 2 more casts here and then we're gonna roll. I don't even see anything. What am I? I'm not even having the Livescope up. I'm not seeing anything on the Livescope. Way up there. Not seeing a ton going on up there. Honestly, golly, there's some fish here busting out in the middle. Don't know what they are. There's a bunch of random fish out here that don't look like they're wanting to do anything. Try to fish up here on this high spot. Man, that thing makes a ton of noise up there. If there was one there, he wants something. He'll freaking come up and eat that top water. Okay, there's 2 casts right across it. Let's roll. We're not wasting time today. If we're gonna get on them, we're gonna freaking get on them, and it's gonna happen like first to third cast. It's gonna happen. So let's roll. A lot of people say I fish fast. I've been told that my whole life, that I fish too fast, and it's always worked out for me. Some of the best anglers I know fish very fast. If you ever heard of guys like Brian New, Todd Castledine, Brian Thrift, Kevin Van Dam, Rick Clunn, those guys all fish fast. A couple of those guys are pretty good at bass fishing, I've heard. I just don't like to mess around. If I'm not getting bit, I'm not gonna stick in a spot. And this is how I always do it. I always just roll fast. I'm kind of even staying in this creek longer than I even normally stay in here, but I wanted to check a couple of these spots, especially that one I wanted to see, because if there's fish that pushed up on that, we could have caught some pretty good ones. Just if they're there, and you're gonna pull up and like on that big top water, I might catch like a 4 or 5 pounder, and then after that it might be one of those deals where I catch 1, 4, or 5 off of it, and I could drag a worm or something like that. But really what I'm doing right now is I'm looking for schools of fish, or I'm looking for a way to catch a big one. Like, I'm not out here to try to catch 14 inchers on Grand Lake in June. Like, I'm trying to find the juice. Usually on Grand this time of year though, it's not a numbers game. You're not gonna be out here catching 30 fish all day long throughout the day. It can be a numbers game. I'll change what I said there. It can be a numbers game. But when I say numbers game, let's see here. I'm gonna stop this recording for a second and then start it on my side. Okay, we're good. So yeah, what I was gonna say is you can catch a lot of numbers this time of year, for sure. It's not like you can't. But the thing is that usually you're gonna end up catching the majority of your fish in a very small window. And I'm out here, and a lot of times, like, you're gonna see me fish for 2, 3 hours a day, and you're gonna be like, man, maybe he didn't catch him, maybe he does catch him. But usually it all goes down in like a 10 to 30 minute window. It's not one of those things where I'm out here just beating on them and catching them all day long this time of year. It's like, when it goes down, it goes down. And then it's a lot of searching in between. And when you're trying to hunt for these 20+ pound bags of fish and you're catching good ones, don't let anyone make you feel like you're bad at fishing or something, because it takes you 4 hours to find fish or 5 hours to find a good group of fish. That's normal. That's just the way it goes. And a lot of people think that when they watch a YouTube video or whatever, that it just happens, and I just pull up on my first spot and just smash them. And that's why I'm making these videos, because that is not at all what happens by any means. I do not smash them first spot, second spot, third spot, whatever, most of the time. Most of the time it's me experimenting, trying to find something, and just bouncing as many spots as possible to try to find some fish. It's kind of the name of the game here. Let's see here, there's a bunch of stuff out in front of this drop. There's a bunch of random fish. Just burning a crankbait over this little ledge. There's some fish right there. You can see them. There's some fish up there up on that flat about 50 foot out in front of me. See if they're gonna bite. Just cranking a little Spro, Little John DD crankbait. Let's drop, see if something comes and eats. There are a few fish on this little deal. Just don't know what they are, what species they are. There's just so much stuff happening. I didn't think they were bass when I graphed it. Like, I was like 95% sure they weren't bass. So I thought they might be white bass though. At least I could get a bite maybe. Make one more cast down this ledge. There's a little bit of a seam right there, and then we're gonna roll. Get out of here. Now, next kind of potential plan of attack, if I don't find them on these ledges, which I still think I might. Oh, coming over brush. Is to try to find some brush out here and throw a big worm in a brush pile. That's another good way. Usually I can find them on ledges out here, but it's not like there's a lot of spots. Like in this whole creek, there might be one ledge spot that they're on. And it might be this one. This could be loaded and I'm just hitting it at the wrong time of day. So I'm not saying that I couldn't catch them on this spot, but they're not biting right now, so we're not gonna hang around. I'm not gonna sit here and drag a worm when I'm not getting bit on a crankbait or anything like that. That just wastes time. I don't have time to waste. We're live. We gotta make this happen. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna work my way. You can see there's fish all over the screen here, all over the spot. I mean, look at that. But if you look at my 2D sonar, there's not a lot of big arches. Like, it looks like on the down imaging that there's a lot going on there, but I filter out all of the smaller fish with 2D with my settings, and as you can see, there's very few to no big arches on the screen. That just means there's not a lot of big fish here, from what I can see. And the bigger fish I do see, I think, might be gar, so we're just moving on. We're not gonna waste time. I do want to I'm gonna make my way out of this creek. I'm gonna graph in front of all these boat docks, see if I can find some brush on some of these boat docks. Then there's a really nice ledge here, we'll graph that. There's a main lake point and stuff out here, and there's a bunch more stuff to just keep graphing. So yeah, I'm not gonna get caught in the back of this creek because I'm seeing a bunch of shad or whatever. Seeing shad and things like that is very overrated at times because yeah, there's food sources here, there's food, and there's stuff, like there's a little rocky deal over here. It looks kind of interesting, and there's a bunch of random things, but I mean, there's just so much going on that I'm not gonna be able to figure it all out in 2 hours, 3 hours. So I can't stop and fish everything. I have to pick and choose what I want to fish. And in my experience, I'm either gonna see a big group of fish stacked up somewhere, or I'm gonna end up catching them out of like a brush pile or something. That's like the two pretty consistent ways for me to catch them, and I'm gonna focus on looking for that. There was a couple of those little rocky spots that looked okay that could have, had some potential, so I didn't want to give up on that quite yet. There's a nice little brush pile out to the left of the boat and to the right. See if there's any decent fish around that. Nope. You can see I graphed over that. Nothing popping on the 2D, no bigger arches, so not worth even taking a look at. We're gonna keep graphing to see if there's any brush. I'm scanning side scan into these docks to see if there's anything going on that way. Oh, guy's fishing off his pier. Need to kind of take evasive actions. Give me a second. Just working my way around. Don't want to disturb anybody this morning. Now it's interesting. I'm seeing a little blue heron up on the bank up here. Set up on the bank. I know there's been some fish caught shallow recently here, but I've caught some fish deep too, so I'm not going to give up on the deep bite, but I do think it's possible that you could catch some fish up shallower, topwater, buzzbait, whopper, plopper, that sort of thing. Water temperature's still 79 degrees, so it's not like these fish have like committed out here fully, all the fish. There's still probably some fish that are up shallow, but that's just not my game. Might be a decent way to catch them. You know, you can even catch them flipping docks, and you know, there's all kinds of ways to catch them. So, not sure all the ways, but there's a few fish on that rocky point right there. That was a good looking little deal. I'm gonna regraph that. Basically, I'm not seeing nearly as much bait here, which is a great sign, because we almost had too much bait in that first spot. Now we're getting a lot less bait, which is actually kind of music to my ears, because it's not, man, that's a great rocky spot right there. I'm not seeing a lot of fish in the rocks or anything. There's a couple of fish right there just suspended off the side. What do those look like? There's a couple, or maybe one, I don't know what that is, maybe one bass. There's some shad up there, but nothing that like jumps off the screen. But if you just take a look at the screen in general, there's a lot less bait activity going on just in the first half of this creek versus the back half of the creek. So that first half of the creek was just completely choked out with bait. The front half, there's still a lot of bait here. I'm not saying there's not bait, but there's less bait than there was in the other part of the creek. So the idea I have is, can I find maybe a little bit easier pattern, find fish set up a little bit better when there's less bait around? That would be my hypothesis, at least. And I'm gonna try to basically graph this ledge. There's a ledge that's set up right here. If I pull up the charts really fast before I get on this ledge, this is a ledge, dark blue, sharp contour lines to the white. That is a ledge, and we're graphing right down it. The way I graph these is I like to get right on the edge of that drop, right where the drop off kind of happens, because a lot of these fish are actually gonna be setting up on top of the drop, or you're gonna be able to see them with the side imaging out to the left of the boat. A lot of people graph kind of off the end of the ledge, and I don't think that that's really the best way to do it. I like to graph a little bit more up on top of the ledge, if anything, because you can see these fish in the shadows of your side imaging if you can get it right. And it's still 8 foot of water, so I'm not like disturbing these fish too much. I can see here, if I look at this, I can also see, let's see here. There are a couple of fish that are set up right on the bottom on that ledge, right here. I'm gonna mark those. Not big, but they're set up kind of right. Okay. On the side imaging, we need to regraph this because I'm kind of, side imaging, you can see that there were some fish that are dotted up over here, right there, there, and there in the shadow of that ledge. So there's a handful of fish right there, so I'm gonna mark those just to have that marked. And I think that should be right where I marked those other fish, which is a good thing. I'm gonna spin back around because it's kind of tricky because you have to graph and mark stuff and do everything all at once. Okay, here we go, this is interesting. So there's a lot more fish right there, look at that. There's actually several fish right there as well. They're set up better here, right on those rocks. I'm gonna mark this. These are fish for sure. There's a good chunk of stuff going on right here. I'll mark this. There's some fish. Okay, come back over here. So we got a fish mark there at that, that we just passed. There's some bait out here. We're basically just gonna probably fish down this whole ledge. I'll probably crank it. I might throw a worm on a couple of these key little deals because there were some fish that are setting tighter at the bottom. But honestly, if I crank this and I get one bite on the crankbait, I should be able to tell really quick if they're here, and then I can slow down once I get a bite on the crankbait. That's usually a good strategy for these ledges this time of the year. But we're gonna see if we can see any more good stuff There's a little brushy deal. Not seeing a ton around it. Let's see here. Mark that as brush really fast. All this stuff properly. I'm gonna graph over this again, see if I can see anything better, see better arches. I didn't really see great arches. Honestly, that other part of the ledge looked a lot better. There was more fish that looked like they were stacked up. But I want to see if there's anything off the end of this real quick. Looks like there might be a couple of fish. Yeah, there's a handful of bigger arches on the 2D. Could be gar, but they're not very long, so those might be bass. Okay. This group of fish, and then I'll start graphing, and I'll keep graphing that way, because there's enough to fish right here as is. And I'm just gonna burn this real fast with a crankbait. That's kind of my go-to this time of year in June. Bass love a crankbait in June, and it allows me to cover water very quickly and tell if the fish are biting. So I'm not going to waste a ton of time on something else. And then once I get a bite on the crankbait, or if I get a bite on the crankbait, maybe not once, but if I get a bite on the crankbait, then I can slow down a little bit. Drag a worm, Carolina rig, shaky head, all the really fun stuff that's not a crankbait that I don't like throwing. Okay. Let's see here. Where are we at? Okay, we're about to get up on top of this thing. Okay, so getting on this ledge, bombing a crankbait and just kind of covering water with the crankbait. It's kind of a combination for me on this deal of graphing plus a little bit of just fishing down these ledges, because you're not going to know exact times, but it's not as easy as they make it sound on YouTube. Sometimes you just kind of have to get out here and just kind of fish and just make it happen. I know I say that like I'm not the person who teaches you guys how to fish on these ledges too, but it's just kind of how it is. Okay. Fish down there at like 18. I'm not seeing a big group of them by any means on the Livescope. So we're going to keep rolling. It doesn't seem like these fish have grouped up in a big school on these like main ledges and stuff, and I can kind of tell that too just by the tournament results, because the tournament results have not been great out here. So if these fish were just stacked on these ledges, it would kind of be game on already. There's a bird up there on that. There's a really flat point up there. One second, I can't see all the way up there, but there's a bird on this point up here. I'm gonna take this big topwater and it's a real flat point that sticks out a long ways. I'm just gonna bomb this, it's like there's a shade of a dock there. There's kind of a lot of stuff happening right there. I'm gonna just bomb this topwater up there for a second. See if there's fish just roaming on this shallow flat. There might be a little like rocky spot or something up there. I can't see because it's only like a foot of water. It just looks good. A couple casts at this. Oh, shad kick in there. One more cast. We're gonna keep working down this drop. Fish, there's a brush pile and there's a couple of fish down there. And if I don't get bit doing this after this deal, like this is the last spot I'm gonna graph where I'm just gonna try to fish, because usually I like to just, in this morning time, I like to do some fishing. The reason I'm kind of fishing more than I would be is because it's a full moon, and these fish, there's a feeding window first couple hours in the morning here. And I wanna try to fish more right now, just because if these fish are up, they're more likely to be active, even if there's not that many fish on a drop. And as we get into later in the stream, once it hits like 9, 10 o'clock, those fish are gonna be out of that early morning feeding window, and it's gonna be a lot harder to catch them. And at that point, we just need to spend a lot more time graphing and less time doing what I'm doing right now, which is basically screwing around fishing. But the reason I say that is just because the reason I'm doing this right now, again, is to try to get that early morning bite where I can capitalize on this feeding window. If these fish, there's a handful of fish I'm seeing on these spots, to see if they're gonna be aggressive. Oh my gosh, they're schooling over there across the way. What in the world? What is happening over there? Freaking schooling up like it's crazy. Okay, I need to go graph that in a second. They're graphing across the way on a straight bank. Don't know what that's about, but we're going to go check that out. That is a fact. After I crank this, we're gonna hop across there, I think. Check that out, because I just saw like a group of fish. I don't know if those are white bass or if those are bass that are schooling. We're gonna go find out. Let's see here. Yeah, there's some fish up here on this ledge. You can see them on the Livescope. There's just not a ton of them that I can see, but there's definitely fish. They're right on that edge, but oh, come on. Hung my crankbait in the brush pile. I was trying to fish. That's not a good sign that there was a fish in that brush pile. Usually if you hang your crankbait in the brush, it means that there was not one there to eat it before it got hung. So I crank brush a lot because it works out a lot of times. You can catch some good ones doing it, but sometimes you just get hung and you lose a crankbait. There we go, got it out. A lot of times though with this little John DD, you can just get over the top of it and pull it out from the other side. It's kind of nice. It's a pretty good crankbait for cranking brush. Let's see here. Really not a lot of fish that are just up here on this ledge. There's a lot of them, they're off the ledge right now, which is interesting. And they're not grouped up. The ledges just might not be the deal today, which is fine. No one said we had, well, I put the thumbnail as ledge fishing, so kind of, there's a couple fish right there. Some fish around, but I put the title as ledge fishing. It doesn't mean we have to ledge fish by any means. It just gets you guys to click on the video. But we're gonna try it at least for a minute. Man, there's some fish chasing up higher on this flat. Doesn't look great. Okay, I'm gonna kick it to high gear and I'm gonna get to those other fish that I marked a second ago. They're just right up here, not very far. If I don't see anything here, then we're gonna go check across where those fish were schooling, and then we're just gonna stop screwing around with all these fish. And we're not gonna stop on the spot until we see them absolutely piled up. That's the plan. And if we don't find them absolutely piled up, then we don't. That's it. Oh, what is that? Okay. Bunch of random junk in the water, that's great. There we go. Some better quality fish right there. I don't know what those are though. Or gar probably, I just saw one surface. I don't think they're all gar, but there's definitely a lot of freaking gar in this creek. The way they're just positioned, they're swimming around, they're not really grouped up. Pretty sure these are just a bunch of gar. Yeah. Yeah, don't need to waste time here. Let's roll. Get out of here. Okay, you can see I fished that very fast. 3 little key sweet spots on that I identified. Didn't get bit on any of them. We're out of here. I'm gonna get across the way. Actually, there's a little, yeah. I'll come back across and grab the rest of this. I do want to check. There was some fish schooling out in front of this like water thing. I don't know what it was. They got water intake over here. And they were busting. I want to check this real quick. Graph around this main lake point. Maybe they're not on the ledges. Maybe they're on these flatter banks, or these steeper banks, or something. I don't know. But we're about to check it out. See if we can see anything. So I am not going to live and die by the ledge bite. If they're not on ledges, I mean, and you guys are like, man, he's been fishing for 45 minutes and hasn't caught any fish. Yeah, welcome to actual fishing. That's called going to the lake, and there's a lot of days when I don't catch any fish. So if you guys are like, man, I can't believe you can't catch fish in 45 minutes live on a stream on a lake or a section of the lake you hasn't been to in a year, well, that's just the way that it works. That's not abnormal, that's just the norm. That's how fishing is. So this is real fishing. This is not post-production or having the fish found a week ahead of time and then going to a spot and trying to catch them later. Like, that's what a lot of stuff happens, guys, is guys will go to the lake, they'll have spots found, they'll pre-script it where it's like, oh, I'm gonna go graph this spot, and they're just gonna be there, and oh, look how great all the fishing is. That's not real. That's not how it works when you're actually out in the lake. And so we're trying to show you the real thing, if we can. This bank looks great for just throwing a topwater down, but there were some fish that were schooled up here. Schooling, I don't know what they were doing. Switch over to this view. There's a bunch of like crap on the screen, but you can see that there's a bunch of small fish on the 2D. There's like fish around here, but they're all very, very small. They may have just been spotted bass schooling, so we're not gonna get too excited about it unless we start seeing like 4-pounders. There's some bait up on the surface. That's probably what those fish were chasing under. There's some fish around here. There's a boat there too, I didn't see them. There's fish around here, but they do not look very big, and they do not, I don't see any like fish like up underneath shad in this exact moment, so I'm not gonna get too excited. Graph around this corner, and then I'm gonna run across. Actually, I'll have the slow no wake finally. I had to idle out of that whole creek, so I thought I might as well graph it because there's no other way to get out of there. I'm gonna graph this main lake point really fast around the steel. I'll show you what I'm looking at on the screen, where I'm at. Just in the main lake point here. Oh, my fish finder screen freeze. Looks like it. Oh no, it didn't. We're good. We're good. Okay. Here's a nice main lake point. This looks interesting. Ooh. Okay. We got a few fish here and there. They don't look very big. There are a handful of fish. 3 or 4 fish. Let me kind of spin back around and regraph that, see if I can hit it from a different angle and the fish show up better. Just a real main lake point. There's not a lot of slope to this one. This is just, it's just pretty steep. That's not a bad thing, because a lot of guys might ignore this type of point because it doesn't look as good on the map as like a traditional structure spot. So this, ooh, look at that. There's some fish down there in 15. I mean, there's not an absolute pile of them, but there is a brush pile down there. Those could be gar, though. It's hard to tell. I'm still trying to get to learn this new unit, guys. I'm gonna mark these. I'll show you what I'm looking at here. I still am struggling with this new unit, this new Garmin, because I don't know exactly what I'm looking at all the time, but there are some fish right there. I'm gonna pull up and make a cast or two with like a football jig or something, because there's definitely something right there to look at. And there's some nice arches and stuff. I'm gonna chunk a football jig down there for a second. The name of the game, guys, this time of year is run as many spots as you can just try to fish as fast as you can on these spots. And as you see in fish places and you're not getting bit, don't stay there for 45 minutes. Fish them for 5-10 casts, move on, and keep just running the numbers game is kind of the deal what we're doing right now. We're running spots that we see fish on. We're not seeing any giant groupings, but let's see here. Got a few fish here and there. That's what we got. Football jig time. See if we can see anything in the live scope. This is a very steep point. Anything actually down there that's interesting? Or am I just going to pick up the trolling motor and leave immediately? That's the question. One cast up there. Let's see here. Well, I'm not seeing like a big school of them or anything. Looks like there's just a bunch of random fish there swimming. If you kind of look at that, you can see that there are fish down there, guys, but they're not like, there's not like a spot where you see 15 fish stacked together. They're just kind of like roaming around this point. I shouldn't even cast it. Wasting my time. Okay, let's keep rolling. There's more stuff to fish. I'll put this up here. It was a waste of a cast. Thought that that was going to be the case when I saw those fish. They didn't look great, but you never know. You could have a spot where there's 5 or 6 stacked up on that point, pull up, you make a cast, and you catch one. You catch a 3 or 4 pounder, and you can run that as a pattern. That happens at times, but not right now. I am just trying to knock off stuff as fast as physically possible, narrowing down the lake. Kind of came in hot on that. Whoops. There's a nice little deal right here showing up on the map. Nice little rocky, looks like it might be a rocky ridge or something sticking out here just by looking at the map. It's got like a contours. It might just be a mapping error too. It's kind of hard to tell. Let's see here. May just be a mapping error. Yeah, there's nothing there. It looked like there was a high spot right there, but there's literally nothing, so just a mapping error. Okay, we're gonna graph through here. I want to start finding some brush piles. That's kind of my next thought, because I haven't really found any fish grouped up real tight and stacked up. There's one more spot I want to go check. It's right around the corner that I think might have some potential for a school. But if we don't find a school on that spot, then we're gonna have to, I'm thinking about just graphing some of these main lake points to try to find some brush piles, because I know that there's a handful of brush piles around this area. I don't know where they are exactly. I don't have any waypoints or anything on this part of the lake, so I think I remember finding some though like 4 or 5 years ago. So we're going to try to go see if there's some brush piles around some general points and areas. Hopefully the cell signal holds up for that part of the stream. We're trying our best, but I want to graph around this kind of little gradual rounded point, which honestly sometimes can be some of the best spots if you can find a group of fish stacked up there. What is that right there? Oh, nothing. Classic. Any brush? Anything up here? Looks like there's nothing. Okay. Another point right here. Graph this, and then we're going to run a couple of, well, there might be 2 or 3 spots we're going to run real quick. Well, there's some brush. Fish in it. No. Nice brush pile. 15 foot of water. Not seeing any fish in it. No good ones, if anything. Might be fish in it, like crappie or something, but no good ones. Okay. Oh, we're in a no wake. Let's get out of this. I'm gonna run a little bit further up here. Let's see how long have we been recording? We've been live for an hour, okay. I'm gonna check this creek right here. There's a little creek that's got a nice point here, and there's a little deal here. Then we're gonna run and we're gonna check, there's a nice point here. And then I'm just gonna go from there, and I'm just gonna start graphing some of this main lake, like all of this stuff in here, because I know that there were some brush I've seen in the past. There's also potentially maybe some fish back in those creeks. So we're gonna go check all that out. Also important to note that it's now 8:30, which means that because it's 8:30, these fish are, okay, we're so good. These fish are probably gonna be out of that early morning feeding window, so I'm going to do a lot less fishing now, just because these fish are not gonna be like up and active anymore, most likely, and I'm only going to stop and start fishing when I really am sure, like, man, that is a guarantee spot, which I'm not saying this is, but like I'm gonna try to wait till I find a spot where I feel like it's absolutely loaded up, as opposed to just fishing everything and anything. Bunch of bait off this deal. Interesting. Is there any fish on that? There's a brush pile. There's a fish in that. No. Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I'm gonna do, my amount of fishing to graphing is going to change drastically now that we're out of the first hour of the day. I was really hoping I could get like kind of a lucky cranking bite or something, just with some of those fish that are up there feeding. There's a couple fish here and there. There's active and up still, kind of like going down the bank, like when you run down the bank and just start catching them, top water and stuff like that. That's kind of what I was doing this morning. But now that that has not transpired, we are now going to enter normal operations. I normally don't get to the lake this early. I'm actually getting to the lake earlier because my camera equipment starts overheating when it gets too late in the day. So it's kind of why we're doing this so early. And I'm not really used to fishing this early in the morning. Normally I get out here like 11 and I do a lot more graphing because the fish are just not quite there yet. But also in the morning, earlier in the afternoon, the fish set up a little bit more. They're a little bit more stacked on structure, on cover. Right now, these fish, because it's kind of this morning time, it's a full moon, they're a lot more likely to roam and not be set up. A lot of times in June, if I was just out here fishing and I wasn't trying to do a live stream with all my electronics, I probably would be just going down the bank fishing and throwing top water, buzz bait, stuff like that, as opposed to fishing offshore all the time and kind of mix it in both. Just especially based on what I'm seeing right now. I'm not seeing a pile of activity. That is kind of interesting right there. Not much to show for it though. There are several brush piles right there though. I need to kind of regraph that. I kind of missed like 3 or 4 brush piles on that pass. Those fish. Ooh, okay. There's some nice fish right there. 1, 2, 3 quality fish on the graph showing up right here. That's kind of nice to see. Those are a little bit deeper off this point. Kind of regraph that. See if they stay there or if they move, because if they move, that's not a good sign, but if they are staying there, that is a good sign. And it might be a good sign that there might be some more fish in these brush piles they're setting up here. There's some brush, there's some bait right there. It's not brush, it's bait. We do have some brush. Okay, so we got several arches down there on the bottom. We have another arch right there. Right there, there's some arches. There's a little bit of brush right here. There's not a lot of fish that are up that are big. I'm gonna graph around this one more time. So I don't know, I'm not 100% sold that this is a spot. I don't wanna like stop and keep wasting time by fishing everything. I still could fish this and not catch anything. But at least I'm seeing some activity now. It's a better quality fish that were off the bottom. Let me spin this around. I want to really hit that edge. There looks like the majority of stuff I'm seeing is out there in that like 14-foot range probably. So it's a little bit deeper than I was expecting these fish to be. Making our pass down this. It's a hard edge there. It's kind of nice. Bunch of bait. Couple piles up there on the right. Actually, several brush piles right there. That's kind of interesting. Are those fish still there? Yeah. There's a couple fish still setting up there right on the bottom. You can see them on the 2D. Right there. They've stayed in place, which is a good sign that they might actually bite. And then the other thing I liked is that there is side imaging. There's these brush piles that are right here. There's a bunch of brush stacked right there. That even if these fish are not in that actual, like I can't catch them the ones that are just off the bottom there, I might be able to catch a couple fish just dragging around in those brush piles. This is a little bit more like what I would expect to see the fish in right now, to be honest, just because they're kind of, oh man, I just keep seeing carp everywhere. I don't know what the deal is. I'm gonna try to drag in these brush piles and see. I really don't like that I keep seeing carp because I feel like I'm getting fooled by carp today, where I'm seeing these better quality fish here down the bottom and they're just not bass, they're just carp. And that happens sometimes, especially when you get a new unit and you don't know exactly what you're looking at. You can get fooled by other species a lot easier. So I don't want that to be what's happening today. I'm not gonna spend a ton of time on these if I don't get bit. But it did look slightly promising. What's happening right there? There's a pile of bait right here. Oh, look at those fish. What are those? Some big gizzards too. Okay. Where did those fish go? There were several fish that came up off the bottom. You guys seeing my screen? Oh, you're not seeing my screen. Good thing I checked. There we go. There was some craziness going on a second ago. There's a brush pile over here. Two I didn't graph. Okay, those are big arches. Those. Wow, there's some big gizzards in here too. Skipping by the boat. What is all that? What in the world? Ooh, they are not happy with my bait. Where those fish are that I'm seeing on the screen there are not bass. They just freaked out at my bait. Okay, where are those fish that I was seeing that were on the bottom down there? Ooh. Let's see here. anything that actually looks worthwhile. I'm not seeing anything. There's some stuff up there. Looks like it might be that brush. Yeah, that is a freaking gar or something right there. Let's see here. There's bait that's getting pushed around. 100 foot out. Trying to see if I see anything on the screen that looks like it could be bass. I am not seeing anything at the moment with these fish that are just kind of roaming out here. This is how I caught them the other day, though. I caught them literally off the bottom on a point like this in like 20 foot of water, and they were chasing like those fish you're seeing, like that fish you're seeing swimming around down there, like at 70 feet. Those were bass that were set up on the bottom, and I feel like I haven't figured out this pattern enough yet to know how to replicate it around the lake. Because I knew that the area I was fishing had bass in it. I just don't know what these are. The challenge of fishing a lot of times the electronics is it's great that you have the electronics and you can see everything, but if you don't know what species you're looking at, it's really not very helpful. And I'm thinking I just need to start tossing in this brush pile over here, the big worm, because there's chasing these randoms that are out here, not really produced anything. So let's toss in this brush pile. Big worm time. This might be the deal today. Let's get up there so I can actually get lined up on it properly. There we go. Brush pile's about 70 feet in front of me. Back us up a little bit. Ooh, I just tapped it. I don't know if it was a bluegill or what that was. You guys can see that brush pile is about 60 feet out now. Not seeing a bunch of life in it, to be honest. I'm seeing a bunch of fish push up on this point up here shallow. Makes me want to go up to the bank because it looks like there's a lot of activity going up shallow. I don't know if it's actually just like tricking me or what's going on, but there's a fish in that brush pile. There's at least one. Something hit me earlier, tapped me earlier. Come on, fish. Man, look at all that bait out there. Holy crap. One more cast. I can kind of make a cast further this way, I think. Hit a chunk I haven't hit yet of that brush pile, and then we're rolling. Man, I can see why the weights have been terrible out here. The lake is not fishing very easy right now. it just depends on the area of the lake you're in though. I think this area of the lake right here has a lot of just stuff going on. A lot of bait, a lot of random crap. I was not seeing that in the area of the lake I was in last week. And I think it might be an area of the lake deal for this sort of deal. Like the offshore bite just might not be fantastic, or it's just there's not that many fish offshore, so you have to kind of find like that one spot where they're on, or it's a brush pile deal like this, like what I'm fishing here, and you just have to run a lot of brush and just know a lot of brush, because these fish that first get off the bank a lot of times will pull into this brush pile deal. But they're not here, I can tell you that much. Let's run the next spot. Okay, next deal. Let's keep rolling. Let's see what we're gonna do next. So we checked the several things. I still think I haven't like fully exhausted this like brush pile back to the pocket bite. I'm gonna check this little creek here, or this little point here that looks pretty good. And then I'm just gonna run into a creek like this area, and I'm probably just gonna graph this whole thing, all of this. I'm just gonna graph this entire thing, because I think this sort of stuff probably gets less fishing pressure, just these random like pockets and creeks. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, there may be some brush and stuff in here that could be pretty good. And I just kind of want to stick around in this area because I think that there's a chance that if I just put my head down and graph, I'll find something, even if it's not like these obvious spots. I don't know what I'm thinking. This last spot I'm going to check here is the last obvious spot I'm going to be trying, to be honest. Then we're just going to do some old school graphing. Okay, I think we're still on, I think. We'll see. Okay, we got a nice point in front of me here. You can see there's a nice like main lake point sticking out here. Big community hole, so it's not like fishing anything that's crazy. There's a couple of little points and things that I'm gonna graph. I'm just gonna kind of graph this whole pocket. Not saying I'm fishing anything that's groundbreaking, guys. I'm just graphing the normal stuff that probably a lot of guys go and graph. And there's a blue heron up on this point, which is good news for me. Kind of like the fact there's that heron up there, to be honest. I don't want to get too close up on this point because that blue heron's up there and I'm seeing shad already kicking up on this point. It looks like we might be into something right here. This looks better than what I've seen recently. We're gonna stay a little bit off this and kind of graph from a distance with the side imaging. Oh my gosh, they're busting up on top of this point, guys. Holy crap, there's several fish busting right there. Okay, we're on them now, we found them. Wow. The gizzards are up there busting. Okay, I just need to get up there and start casting. You can see that it looks the same on the screen as what we've been doing. I mean, there's just a bunch of random little stuff, but they're literally schooling up on top of this point. So yeah, I mean, what else can you ask for? And this is why we keep bumping spots, guys, because I mean, we're gonna eventually land on something. And when they're busting up on top of a point, I think it's probably a good sign that something's happening. I'm gonna start with this big walking topwater. That's my initial game plan. Bomb that thing up there. There's a little shade line still up there. There's some brush out here too. Man, there's all kinds of stuff off this point. But bomb that topwater up there. See if one big one comes up and eats it. Oh gosh, he tried to eat it. Missed one. Come on, fish. Come on, fish. Get a little bit closer. I'm actually gonna turn sideways. I'm gonna come at it from a different angle because I don't want to work my way right up on top of this point because I might be able to catch some fish dragging too off this point, but I think we found something. Had one try to eat my topwater. Missed it. Come on, big one. Come get it. Unless you're all small. Should be really sad. Oh, what is that? Dang. Oh my goodness, look at that right there, guys. There's a wad of them sitting right there, 8 foot. An absolute wad of them right there. I'm gonna fire this topwater up there a couple more times, and then like that is a literal, throw a worm and just smash them right there. Oh, they're schooling right in front of my bait too. Come on, fish. You're literally schooling right on my bait. They must be little, or I don't know what's going on up there, because they're schooling on my bait. Man, there's a wad of them right there behind the boat. We're gonna drag a shaky head through that in a second, but before that, I do want to throw the hover rig over, because maybe these fish will eat the hover. Possibly. I've had some luck with these schoolers with the hover recently that won't bite the topwaters and stuff, but might just because they're small. Oh gosh. I'm getting freaking hyped because they're busting everywhere, and then I can't put one in the boat. I don't know what to do. Fish for the schoolers, drag on these other ones. I feel like I need to drag on these other ones. They keep busting. Okay, let's go drag on these fish over here. Let's throw way up on that point with this hover real quick. Where'd that wad go? Keep this handy. Grab black shaky head. It's my go-to bait when these fish are this time of the year kind of getting a little bit funky. I'm gonna try to see if I can find that little pod of them I saw earlier. They're a little bit deeper off this point. There's a pile of brush and bait and all kinds of stuff right there. I'm gonna change this range down a little bit to 20 foot. Man, you think there's some freaking bait out there? All that, it looks like brush, it's just bait. There's just bait all over this point. There's just covered. There's fish busting. Might be a point where there's too much bait where I can't get these fish to react to my bait. There's a little bit of brush down there too. I think that's some brush. And some fish. And some bait. My goodness. You figure out how to get these fish to bite? That's the question. So much brush piled up down there. That's crazy. Someone went to town. Just don't know if there's any good ones up there or what's going on. I did see that shit fired on that wad of fish when I saw him there. Still busting up on top of this point, but they look pretty small, like smaller fish. Not the size we're really looking for. Man, there's so much happening on this spot. It's hard to know what to do. A lot of times though, when they're busting like this, the best course of action is honestly to wait till it chills down and some of these fish just stop roaming in the morning and just come back to the spot later. And another good strategy is to just drag around with like a worm and stuff, because these fish are so keyed up on the shad that you can kind of catch them just dragging a little bit. There's a good one in that brush pile right there. There's one good one right in that brush pile right in front of me. 50 foot out. Can we get that fish to eat? And that's the question. Where'd you go? Fish were not even remotely interested in my bait. What are those? Those do not look like bass. What are those? You know, I'm not talking very much. I'm trying to focus on trying to see if I can catch those fish right there. There's just so much activity off this point. I'm thinking the better quality fish might be pulled off the side. That was what was happening the other day I was out here. They were pulled off deeper off these points in this deeper water. Just don't know if that's what's happening today or not. Because there's fish down there on the bottom. I just don't know what they are. I don't know if they're bass. I don't know if they're something else. Man, look at those fish. They're sitting up. Stake bed there. There's a fish. Several fish that are on this little hard, there's like a harder spot right here. They're setting up close to the bottom. 16 foot. Right on the bottom though. Just don't know what species they are. So many trash fish and catfish and all kinds of stuff in this lake. It's so hard to tell at times. Unless they come in to actually try to eat your bait. Oh, he tried to chase it. He was semi-interested. Let's keep rolling. I'm just gonna roll around this deal for a second. See if there's anything on this other side, this back side of it. Just a lot of bait, not a lot of fish. Not a lot of bass or whatever is going on. Don't know what's happening around here. A lot of bait right there getting chased. Bait's gonna come right through them, so we'll see if they're interested in my stuff. Just don't know what we're dealing with here. So much activity, so many fish, it's just overwhelming. Let's keep graphing. That was a big disappointment. I thought I was gonna catch something there. Off that point, maybe I could later. There's just so much happening there. So many fish busting and bait busting and gar and carp busting. I didn't really see any big bass busts. The only bass I saw were a small one. I had one slap at my top water, but it wasn't very big. I just thought maybe there'd be bigger ones around it. Well, you know, when you're having a tough time on the water, you're not finding them, which is normal. This is normal fishing, not trying to make any excuses or anything. This is just how it kind of just normally goes. I mean, still just trying to figure it out. That's why pros practice 4 days for Elite Series events. They don't figure it out first day every single time. They have 4 practice days for a reason. But whenever I'm having a tough day and it's just not going as planned, really this isn't that tough of a day. I've been streaming for a couple hours, so it may seem like it's tough, but really, been out here for an hour and a half streaming. That's literally not long at all. That's like, I've been a deal here. Uh-oh, whoa, 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 whoa. What are you doing? There we go. Okay, and then we just gotta reconnect this. Give me a second, guys. I'm just figuring out how to get this deal switched over real quick. Okay. Okay, that's good. Now let me switch this thing. One second, guys. This is just kind of part of the process here. Okay, we good here? Is this working? No? Probably can still hear me. I'm still working on this. I'm trying to figure out how to fix this real quick. Oh, there we go. Okay, we're getting somewhere. Okay, we're getting this figured out. Hey, we're back. Okay, we're back on that. We're back maybe over here. Oh, I need to switch this real quick too. Okay, oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, guys, we're back. So that's what I was saying. Remember, I'm having a tough day, guys. Get yourself some Bridgeford beef jerky, eat a little beef jerky, calm yourself down, and just start reevaluating the situation. That's always what I like to do when I'm, we're an hour and a half into the day. So I'm gonna sit down on the graph here. I'm gonna grab some Bridgeford beef jerky, grab a little bit of water. We're just gonna reevaluate, and we're gonna take a kind of a recap of the day and see what's been going on so far. So let me get back over here. Okay, so what have we learned so far in our day? We're an hour and a half in, which is not a lot of time. Like, honestly, an hour and a half is not that much fishing when you're out, when you can be on the lake there's so much water to cover. I'm gonna open up some Bridgeford while I'm doing this. And basically what I've learned is that all of the main obvious structure-y spots that I'm thinking these fish could be on have not really produced anything. All of the standard spots, the ledges, the humps, the high spots, the obvious structure things I'm always trying to fish. And it doesn't seem like the fish are grouped up very well. They're spread out, they're scattered. And there's two things that could be contributing to that. One, there's so much bait out here right now that these fish are just kind of I don't know, they're kind of freaked out because there's so much bait. And that causes them to spread out, kind of move around. That maybe isn't always the case, but you need a big group of fish to kind of make them all lock down with each other. So like if we were going to try to find an area that has a bunch of fish on it right now, I think we need to have like a school of 50 to 100 fish on it. We have not found a spot like that yet. Those spots are hard to find. Those spots aren't just everywhere. The other option is to graph around and just try to find some brush piles or some areas that are leading out of these pockets and coves. And one thing I'm thinking about on the map, having some at Bridgeford really does, just calms you down a little bit. Just eat some Bridgeford, just chill. Don't freak out when you're out here. You go for an hour and a half and you're like, man, I'm not catching any fish. The world's over. It's not over. You've only been out here for like an hour. It's all good. Think about how many times you've gone out and not caught fish in an hour. That happens all the time. So don't freak out and don't start randomly running around and doing crazy stuff. Just chill. So what I'm thinking is that I checked like the very back one of these creeks, this creek here. Saw a pile of bait, didn't see any fish grouped up. Now, check some of these shorter creeks, we're seeing less bait, but it's still not really the deal. Now, unfortunately, I can't move around too much because the cell service isn't everywhere on this lake. But what I'm thinking is if I try this creek here, it's more towards the main lake. It's not so far back into the back of this creek. Maybe, just maybe, if I find some brush kind of in this area, there might be some fish that are pulling out kind of out of these spawning pockets, out of these spawning areas and setting up on brush that's just down some of these flatter banks. A lot of guys are gonna check these obvious structure spots that I've been fishing today. So they're gonna get fishing pressure. There's like 1,000 boat tournament or something ridiculous that was out here like a week ago. So all these spots I'm fishing have probably just got hammered. So what can you do to kind of put yourself in a position where your fishing spots aren't getting hammered? Well, one is to graph stuff that guys just are not really checking, which, for example, another one of these would be like this short pocket here. And I like when I get into a situation where I don't know what's going on, I just like to get on the graph and just go. And that calms me down a lot. I just graph and graph and graph and graph until I start seeing quality fish and something that like really jumps off the screen. And I thought I was doing that with these last couple spots, but I wasn't seeing everything perfect. So what I mean by that is I'm not seeing like 4 or 5 or 6 big fish stacked up close together. They're staying there. I'm kind of checking a bunch of stuff where the fish are kind of scattered around. And sometimes that can work out, but it's bass, or if you're dealing with carp or gar or whatever, so have bass on them. And I'll kind of explore their stack together. It also helps if I had a fish finder that I knew better. This is a brand new fish finder, so I'm still kind of like learning how to use this. But I think what I've been doing is I've been trying to fish for the camera too much, trying to, get up there and cast. I've been casting too much. And if you self-reflect on some of those things, like for me today, I'm trying to put on a show, try to catch fish for you guys, and I just think I've been fishing too much instead of trying to graph and do my normal thing. And this is my second live stream I've done for you guys, and want to put on a good show. But I think that a lot of times you got to self-reflect and be like, okay, what am I doing that's causing me to not catch fish? I don't think that I'm doing anything wrong right now necessarily. It's just, this is how it normally goes. But I think I need to just realize that it's not easy out here right now. I can't just pull up on random spots and just start, see a few fish here or there and just start fishing. I need to see the juice. And to find the juice takes a lot of time, a lot of patience, a lot of graphing. Now I got like an hour and a half left on this camera battery, so we're gonna go for an hour and a half. We're gonna graph, we're gonna try to find the juice. But I'm not stopping until we find the juice. So I'm just gonna keep graphing. If the juice appears, we'll fish it. If the juice doesn't appear, then we might just be graphing for an hour and a half, and you might just be seeing me doing what I'm doing right now, which may not be the most exciting, but that's normally how my days go. So if you guys don't like this, then you may not like my normal style of fishing, because I just do literally a lot of this. Now I might find the juice in the next like 5 minutes, and it kind of blows my whole point out of the water, which would be fine with me too if I find good fish, but a lot of times it takes a long time, a lot of graphing to find stuff. Just double checking my, honestly I don't even need the mapping. I'm just gonna pull up this 2D and side and down. because the mapping isn't really relevant right now. Just graphing. Trying to graph stuff that's a little bit less obvious. And when you're graphing stuff that's less obvious too, that like other guys aren't fishing to avoid pressure, there's two ways you can do it. You can try to find stuff that's off the beaten path around community holes. So like find the community holes and fish stuff that's off the beaten path, which I kind of did a little bit today, but didn't have any success. Or actually find something off the beaten path that just doesn't look that good. The best way to do that is to turn off the mapping and just graph. Don't worry about what the map says, because everyone can read a contour map now. If everyone can read a contour map, that means they're going to all the good spots. Now, for the first hour of a day, hour and a half of a day, I like checking the obvious spots because they're obvious for a reason. They're community holes for a reason. They have fish. But if those aren't firing, not popping off, it's a lot better at times to just get off the beaten path and just start graphing. Graph stuff you don't think about. Like normally I would never graph this main lake stuff out here. I don't know, I just normally wouldn't be out here graphing this. And that's exactly why I want to graph it, because it's out of the norm. It's out of the ordinary from what I would think the fish are doing. And if I think it's out of the ordinary, probably most anglers do too. Now my chances of finding fish out here may be lower, but if I do find something, it could be pretty special, potentially. So it's kind of the deal. Show you where I'm at on the lake, just so you guys can see. Literally, it's graphing a main lake point in the mouth of this creek, and it's the most boring, ugly point you'd ever see. Here, literally nothing there that looks interesting, but could have some hammers on it. There's some fish right there. No idea what those are. Not the juice though. Not the juice. Take a Bridgeford break. Eat some Bridgeford beef jerky. I feel so much better already, guys. Just eating some Bridgeford. Just chilling. Not getting too over excited. Not freaking out. That's like 90% of bass fishing. Don't get mentally spun out. Give up on stuff right away. Now, you may be wondering, how do you know that you're not graphing by the mother lode right now? I want to spend a lot of time on my graphs, so I kind of know in general what looks like fish. And everything I've stopped on today has had fish. If you look at the Livescope and everything, there are fish swimming around in all the spots I've stopped on. I think I've been stopping on a lot of trash fish, a lot of catfish and carp, and there's just so many fish around that it makes it kind of difficult, because some of those fish, if they're randomly swimming and they set up in a certain way and there's so many of them down there, eventually one of them is going to look like it's positioned like a bass that's set up the right way. And that can be frustrating at times, because it's like, man, I thought I had the deal, and you graph and you graph and you think you found this like magic little hole or whatever, and it turns out that it's just a bunch of carp or gar or whatever. And each unit has a little bit of a different deal in terms of what species of the fish look like, depending on your settings. I'm still dialing in my settings on this deal, so I'm trying to figure that out. I'm going to adjust them after this stream, because I think there's some things I can do with my settings that'll make them a little bit better. That's why I haven't posted the settings guide for this unit yet, because I just don't think they're right yet. Settings aren't quite right, so I'm not going to post a settings guide unless I feel like it's the juice and it's got all the good stuff in it. It actually works. Keep graphing, keep rolling. We're going to roll around this corner. I think I remember seeing some brush here a while ago, so maybe there's something here. I don't know. We shall see. Getting a little bit shallower, I kind of like that. Oh, okay. Brush pile. Couple of fish around it. Another something to the right. Boat. Nothing big. A few fish here and there. Not the juice, just it's something. A lot of brush around this. Not a lot of fish. If you look at my 2D, you'll notice that there's not any big arches on the 2D, but there are a lot of dots on the down imaging. That just means that we're dealing with smaller fish, crappie, bluegill, stuff like that. I can identify the smaller fish pretty well. I'm getting messed up by the gar, and this is my first time on a lake where there's been a lot of gar and catfish like grand with this unit and these settings where I've really like spent a lot of time grafting around. That's a big ball of bait, and that's kind of messing me up a little bit, I think, on determining what's what. But we're gonna keep graphing. There's just a bunch of flatter banks and flatter deals. I'm hoping to almost find like a little underwater rocky ridge or something that just kind of looks different on the map or on the graph where you're like, man, that looks like a spot. Now I could also just graph over this and just see a giant wad of fish. That could look great. Or maybe they'll just come up like busting. That happens a lot of times when you just graph. The more you just move around and check more stuff, good stuff like that happens. I run into schooling fish and fish that just like bust on a spot and I'm like, oh, there they are. I run into that very often because I spend so much time out here graphing that you just put yourself in a position to run into that sort of stuff that more often than other guys. So that's also, I mean, it's not necessarily a strategy you can rely on. It's like graph until you see schooling fish, but it does happen as well. I'm also feeling better that I'm not stopping every 5 seconds to fish. I think I was getting a little bit trigger happy on them. I wanted to get some footage for you guys, but this is kind of more my comfort zone of driving until I find them. I'm also not graphing the community holes anymore, so the chances of me running into fish, there were a lot of fish on a lot of those spots I was fishing earlier. The stuff I'm doing now, though, I'm graphing now, has a lot less likelihood of actually having a group of fish on it. But if there is a group of fish there, it could be pretty good. Uh-oh. What is all that? That looks pretty interesting. Is that the juice? I wonder. Need to graph that again, a little bit deeper. Look pretty good. There's a bunch of fish on 2D on a point that's literally not showing up on the map. This point does not, it shows I'm in the middle of a ditch and there's actually a point right here. So that's why I say ignore the mapping. The mapping was very wrong on this spot. I do want to see if there's anything deeper out here. There's fish deeper. And I'm not seeing, ooh, what am I seeing there? There's a lot of bait there. I might just be getting fooled by the bait. Looks like there's, let me see if I can get, I'm gonna graph back over that one more time. I think there's just a lot of bait there. I don't think there's actually a lot of fish. And they don't look big, to be fair. They look like small fish. I'll graph over that one more time. Usually if I have to graph something 3 times, it's usually not the juice. It's probably a good rule of thumb on my part. If I have to check it this much, probably not what I'm looking for. But let's see here. They've also, you can kind of see that these fish have somewhat moved from what I was doing earlier. Yeah, it's just a bunch of bait and stuff. Nothing good. When I re-graph a spot and those fish aren't stacked up there again, like they've moved, Sometimes you would think that that's like your engine like spooking them, but usually they don't get spooked that bad by just your boat idling over top of them like one time. So when you graph over them again, they'll be stacked up in that same spot. And those fish were not by any means stacked up in the same spot. It looked like, that's what I've been getting tricked by all day, is I've graphed stuff once, see it, I just jump. And I try to go fish it. I need to re-graph the stuff, see if the fish are still positioned there, because if they're bass, they'll stay there. The bass will stay in that same spot, stacked up in the right way. Random fish that are just swimming around, they will have a tendency to leave, move, shift position. Bass like to stick around in one spot a lot longer. That is definitely something I've learned. There's a bunch of rock right there. It's to the left of the boat. It's interesting. And just a pile. There's bait fish everywhere in this lake right now. Which I don't know if that's helping anything. That might be hurting it, to be honest, because there's so many bait fish in this lake. There are so many bait fish. But yeah, this is crazy. Keep on keeping on. I want to graph to the back one of these little guts to see if there's anything back in here. Just kind of chilling in the back of this. It's getting kind of shallow. I might turn around here. There's like a marina thing here that's kind of interesting. Just to my right. I'm gonna spin around here. It's getting kind of shallow back in this pocket. This looks great if you want to catch some brimbed fish, some shallow topwater fish. Not exactly what I'm looking for right now. Uh-oh, brush pile with what looks like to be nothing in it. Which is great. So question for you guys in the stream, since I'm just chilling. Do you guys prefer that I do what I'm doing now, which is going out blind, graphing for them, and maybe not finding fish, but at least trying? Or would you prefer that I go out, find fish, then come back the next day and show you the fish that I found? I think there's value in showing the process, but I can see that it can be kind of boring if I'm just literally driving around graphing, but this is what fishing is for me. So I could find them first and then be like, okay, I found them, and then I can go make a live stream of me just doing the catching and like graphing the spot and catching them. I can 100% do that. There was a spot on Grand, I could go do that today, and I decided not to do that because I have fish found. I wanted to show you the process of actually finding them. And I mean, we've been streaming now for, let's see here, 2 hours. Haven't found anything, but that's pretty typical. That's like normal day. But this is what the normal day is. It's a lot of this. So let me know in the comments if you guys, in the stream comments, if you guys actually like this. Oh, what is that out to the right? Uh-oh. Is that something on side imaging? What is that? No, those are not fish. But there's like I say uh-oh because it looks like there's like a stump thing there. It's stump flat. Stump field. I just want to see if there's fish around there. There's not actually, I didn't see like the fish, but. Yeah, let me know if you guys actually like this. Man, this is like the type of spot I was expecting to be on. A little stump on the end of a secondary point, post-spawn. Come on now. And I graph a lot of spots that I'm like, man, they should just be here, and they're just not. It happens all the time to me. What do we got there? That's a nice arch. That's a nice arch. It's another 2 more nice arches right there. Ooh, another arch. Two more arches, okay. This looks promising right here. I'm not like 1,000% sold on this. That's the best thing we've seen. Look at all those little stumps and stuff on the side imaging. The reason I like this is because you have like a brush pile right here, which I'll mark with brush, which those fish can relate to. There's some sort of cover for them, and then there's those stumps that they can chill on right there. And we saw several arches up and around this deal. I don't know what bait I need to throw to get those fish to bite, but those stumps right there look really good. I'm gonna just try to fire on them. I think I might need to even tie on like a Neko rig or something like that. Maybe something a little more subtle on these fish, or I need to tie on like a Carolina rig or something, but that looked pretty good, to be honest. Switch over here. There we go.